Hi students, this video will help you understand the three tools of oxymoron, antithesis, and paradox a little more clearly. So what these three tools have in common is, they might hurt your brain a little, because what they do is they take contrasting, opposing, and sometimes straight out opposite ideas and put them side by side or in the same sentence, which should ultimately make it nonsense, but in actuality brings a better understanding or a unique understanding to an abstract or complex concept. So let's see what that actually means. Let's start with oxymoron. So oxymoron is a figure of speech in which two words with opposing meaning are used together side by side intentionally for effect. So let's look at 4 examples to see what that really means practically. So here we have beautiful mess, same difference, jumbo shrimp, and civil war. So if you take a look at each of these, what they're doing is they're putting two words side by side that ultimately have opposing meanings. So for instance, civil means peaceful, while war is a really big fight. So these words should ultimately be nonsense when put side by side. But what they're actually doing is creating a more complex meaning that makes us reconsider what we think or understand about war. So let's look at some movie examples. We have Back to the Future, The Living Dead, and True Lies. So why do these movies all use oxymorons as their titles? Well, for starters, it might be to be humorous. By putting two opposing words side by side, you create kind of absurd phrasing, which can, get a little giggle out of your audience because it's unexpected and therefore funny. It could also be by accident, but if you think back to our original definition of oxymoron, it says intentional, so I don't actually accept this to be true. If you want it to be an oxymoron, you gotta do it on purpose. And the last one that we're going to focus on is to create emphasis. So let's take a look at this title, True Lies. So lies is a concept that we probably have a common understanding of. The idea is if you lie, it will lead to negative repercussions and very likely hurt those that you have lied to, making lying a very negative thing. However, this title makes us reconsider this concept of lies because all of a sudden they are true lies. Ooh. So what this does is it suggests that by lying, we might somehow attain or reach some more significant truth. Therefore, it provides certain circumstances in which one might need to lie in order to find the truth. Now, I'm not saying that you should go around and start lying. Lying is wrong. But this movie provides circumstances in which lies might be necessary. And that makes us understand lies in either a different or unique way. So, now that we understand oxymorons, let's move on to antithesis. So antithesis is a balance in which two contrasting ideas are intentionally juxtaposed, usually through parallel structure. So this is a pretty heavy definition. So let's use this example to actually break down what that definition means. So this is a quote from President John F. Kennedy, and it says, "We observe today not a victory of party, but a celebration of freedom, symbolizing an end as well as a beginning, signifying renewal as well as change." That's a nice quote. So let's use this to look at the definition. So for starters, we have two contrasting ideas, very much like an oxymoron. However, the difference is while in an oxymoron they need to be side by side, an antithesis just needs to be juxtaposed, which just means that they need to be near each other. Same sentence is probably how you'll see it. So here we have victory, and it's being juxtaposed to the contrasting idea of freedom. Now, this isn't going to be completely opposite, but it is opposing if you really think about it. So in victory, you have a winner and you have a loser, and therefore the loser is often oppressed by the winner. And that's the opposite of freedom, which suggests that people are completely equal. So victory and freedom are ultimately contrasting. Here we have one that's clearly an opposite, where we have end and beginning. And then we have another one that's a little more difficult, which is renewal versus change, which are in fact opposing if you think about it. With renewal, you get rid of everything and you just start over. And with change, you take the things you already had and you slightly alter them to make them work. And so these are opposing ideas. They're opposite actions. One you throw stuff away, one you keep. So that satisfies the first part of the antithesis definition, where you have two contrasting ideas juxtaposed. Now, what is this whole parallel structure nonsense that we're talking about here? So parallel structure is when you have a sentence that mimics itself. What does that mean? I think the ending is an excellent example, where you have symbolizing an end as well as a beginning, which is parallel to signifying renewal as well as change. Symbolizing parallels signifying as well as parallels as well as. And so that's what parallel structure is. It's two sentences that have grammatical similarities. And those grammatical similarities should emphasize the contrasting ideas. So here, the parallel structure emphasizes end, beginning, renewal, and change, which are the important concepts in this antithesis. So let's look at a second example, and this one's a little more straightforward and probably one of the most famous instances of antithesis in literature. And it was written by Charles Dickens. And he wrote, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times." So here we have the contrasting terms, best, worst. So we have two contradicting ideas that are being juxtaposed, and these are quite obviously opposites. And then we also have the parallel structure. It was the, of times. We have a sentence that mimics itself. So what is the purpose of antithesis? So as we mentioned before, antithesis emphasizes the words that are not being repeated in the parallel structure. So here best and worst are emphasized. Now, if we just make a snap judgment, we would say this is impossible. A single time cannot be both the best and the worst. That's nonsense. It's impossible. But actually, it's not. What it is it's bringing a more complex understanding of the concept of time. And if you put this in the concept of the novel, what Charles Dickens is pointing out is that in his time period, it was the best of time for the wealthy and the worst of time for the poor. And therefore, it's showing that different people can experience one moment in time very differently based upon who they are. So therefore, we suddenly have this much more complex understanding of an abstract concept, time. And that's what antithesis does. It evokes thoughts in the reader, so hopefully they can come to a better understanding. So now let's move on to our last term, which is paradox. So a paradox is a statement that seems to contradict itself, but is actually true. Now you might be thinking, well, that's exactly what an oxymoron and antithesis does, so how am I supposed to know the difference? Really, ask yourself, when you see a contradiction, is it an oxymoron? No. Is it antithesis? No. Well, then it must be a paradox. So let's take a look at this example. I like this one. I know that I know nothing at all. So this seems contradictory. So this person, Socrates, he knows something. But then he says he knows nothing. That doesn't seem possible, but actually, it is very true. So let's start and ask ourselves, is this an oxymoron? So we don't have two words placed side by side. Know nothing is kind of feels like an oxymoron, but it's not, because know and nothing aren't actually opposites. Known and unknown would be opposites, but know nothing isn't. So it's not an oxymoron. Is it an antithesis? I know that, I know nothing. That does not have parallel structure. If it said, I know that, I know that, well, that would be terrible wording, but that would make it parallel. So it is not antithesis. So therefore, it has to be paradox. Here we have dark fins appear innocent, as if in fair warning. It's not oxymoron because we don't have opposing words side by side. Not antithesis because there is not parallel structure. So it has to be paradox. And what it's doing, it's saying the dark fins of the shark are innocent. That doesn't seem possible. So what you might notice is that paradox is more conceptual. It's not necessarily two words being opposites. It's the concepts kind of oppose each other. So let's take a look at one final example before we end our lovely video. So this one says, the curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change. So the contrasting concepts or ideas we have here are the idea of accepting yourself would mean that, okay, I accept myself, I'm not going to change anymore. But then the act of doing that makes you change. That seems impossible. It seems like nonsense. But in reality, it is true because accepting yourself makes you grow as a person. And if you're growing, then you're changing. And therefore, the paradox is ultimately true. What is the purpose? It makes us consider the abstract concept of acceptance and change in a whole new light. So that is how paradox works. All right, well, hopefully this prepares you for your assessment. If not, go ahead and explore the internet, try some practices, and just keep working on it. All right, good luck. Bye.